Collingwood is one of Melbourne's older suburbs. It was officially named in 1842 after a British admiral. Since last century, many newcomers have made their homes here. Usually they've come looking for work in the factories, breweries and mills. These bulky brick buildings often cover huge areas dominating the nearby houses. The lofty chimneys have become well-known landmarks. In this busy industrial suburb, it is easy for the visitor to miss one of Collingwood's most interesting features, for it's here that the Merry Creek joins the Yarra River. Settlers were first drawn to the area by the ready supply of fresh water and fertile places along the river. They cleared the boulders and trees, using the timber for firewood and fencing. For thousands of years before the white settlers arrived, this junction of river and creek was a favourite camp of the local Aborigines, the Wurundjeri tribe. Both the Merry and the Yarra are still called by their Aboriginal names. The Aborigines lived close to the land and used what it offered. Wildlife, waterfowl and eels were plentiful for the hunters. The Aboriginal women collected other food, often digging for the roots of plants. This Aboriginal camp by the Merry Creek was drawn in 1860. 20 years before, Melbourne was still a very small settlement. Gradually it expanded and the land around Collingwood was divided up and sold. Much of the river frontage was given over to farming, but some was too swampy to be of much use. In 1860, these cattle were driven down Hoddle Street, close to where it now crosses a busy freeway. One farm still remains. For more than 100 years, it was part of the Convent of the Good Shepherd. Now it's known as the Children's Farm. It remains a patch of country in the inner city, a place where children can handle farm animals, and a place where they can still see a little of the Collingwood that has all but disappeared. Early this century, people still kept dairy cows and other livestock in the open areas of Clifton Hill. But the factories for which Collingwood is now well known were not long in coming. The first was probably the flour mill built in 1839 by John Dight at what is now called Dight's Falls. The bluestone walls of the mill race still exist. The river was the key to the siting of many of the factories. For some, like the flour mill, it was a source of water and power. For others, a convenient drain. The gold rushes of the 1850s brought vast changes. Immigrants poured into Victoria. Many eventually settled in Collingwood. They came looking for work and cheap housing. The increasing population meant a cheap labour force was on hand for the brewing, tanning, boot and textile industries. Collingwood soon became a busy manufacturing municipality. The early factories were fairly small concerns, but most soon grew. In 1880, Denton's hat factory employed 200 people. The larger factories, such as Foy and Gibson's, were built after the Depression of the 1890s.
My name's Ian Harold. I'm director of a shoe factory in Collingwood. My grandfather started the shoe factory in 1920, and he came out from England and worked for the British United Shoe Machinery Company, which was a leasing machine company up in Smith Street. And because that being here and the river with all the tanneries around it, the shoe industry sprung up around Collingwood. Now, he worked for the British United for 2 years and then started on his own here in Collingwood. He built the factory in 1921 and he died in 1953, so he was here for a long time. My father then came in the business in 1930 and he's still around, but he only comes and advises us now. I've been here since 1955 and the people who are with me right now have all been here at the same time, so we've all been together 30 years. The shoe industry in Collingwood was huge, really. We had something like 100 factories around Collingwood with all the supply groups and their tanneries and machinery supply. In its heyday, the factory employed something like 150 to 170 people and worked right through the Depression, and during that time we were always in full production, and most of the shoes that were made here were sold either on consignment, which was sale or return, or sold direct to the retailer.
Many of Collingwood's older people can remember leaving school as youngsters to work long hours in the factories for little pay.
Well, I was paid half a crown in those days, which is 25 cents now a week. And I didn't get a rise for 12 months, and then I got a shilling rise, which is 10 cents now. I used to walk to work from Clifton Hill to Foy and Gibson's, night and morning, and it took me 20 minutes in those days. Take me longer now.
Over the years, many people have found work making and selling the goods from Collingwood's factories. Smith Street has been a bustling shopping centre for many years. Many of the buildings that lined the street in 1903 are still there today. So are some of the early retailers. Coles opened in Smith Street more than 70 years ago. Today, the brewing giant at Carlton and United dominates the skyline, reminding us that this is still one of Collingwood's important industries. The skills required of the workers may have changed, but 100 years on, Collingwood can still boast of its farms and factories, boots and beer.